differently to most weeks. I want to actually get started with a little bit of your journey into writing. Kind of what was the initial seed of inspiration for you becoming a writer?
Oh gosh, how long have you got?
As long as you like.
I'll try and give you an abridged version. Well, I think the love of writing, well, first of all, it started with the love of reading. I think with a lot of writers, it starts with reading first. Now, I don't remember this. This was when I was 4 years old, my very first day in nursery. And I was quite a precocious child, I've been told by my mother many times. And I wasn't one of these clingy, tearful kids who don't want to be left, you know. I was the opposite. I just ran into a sea of kids, didn't even look back at my mother, apparently. Again, I don't remember. I was 4 years old, so I don't remember. But yeah, I think my mother was upset. I'm the first, I'm the oldest, you know. So it's always the most difficult with the oldest. And I just didn't even care. I just ran off. But what I didn't realize is because I'm the oldest of 4 children to Indian Bangladeshi immigrant parents, they spoke Bengali to each other and me. So that first day at nursery, I had no idea, I had no concept of the fact that the language that I spoke is not the language that these kids spoke. In fact, I doubt I would even have had a concept of language really at that point, that there are different languages and there are different countries, and I wouldn't have had that concept. So off I went. All these wonderful children. I'm so excited. I'm very sort of extroverted in that sense. I really like talking to people. I still do. And I just went off speaking very loud Bengali to all these kids. Now, first of all, I was the only brown kid in the whole place. This is Gateshead, UK, which even now, Gateshead has a reputation for being one of the whitest cities in the UK. Going back to 1982, as you can imagine, they literally didn't see any brown or black people there. Yeah. So I was an oddity in the first place. And then here I come speaking this strange language that nobody can understand. I must have figured out very early on that they don't understand me. And I don't know how I made that connection to books, because my mother says she was watching me and within 10 minutes, I'd run off to the corner library.
Right.
And I just buried myself into a book. And then she tells me for the next year, she would drop me off. I'd run straight away to the library. And when she'd come to pick me up a few hours later, I was still in the library. To the point that a year later, the teacher told me they had to buy new books because I'd finished all the books in the library. So actually, the writing came from that. I was such a voracious reader from an early age. And I don't remember because I was so young at that time. But I must have been reading in a bid to be able to learn English,
right,
so I can communicate to all the children. So that's where it actually came from. And then most writers will tell you once that you get into the reading and you really enjoy it, you want to start doing it. So I started writing stories and poems and all these things that, you know, kids who like writing, they do. But I never really saw it as a career option. My parents are quite strict. They wanted me to be a doctor. I know, it's so boring. It's like Indian girl with an education. What else is she meant to be? A doctor, of course. So, you know, I was meant to be a walking, talking stereotype, basically. And then what happened was one of my teachers, a German teacher, which I find weird. It's like my German teacher entered me into a competition where it's English. You're writing essays. It's in English. So I don't know what she was doing, but she really, really liked my writing. And she secretly sent off one of my essays that I'd written for another teacher, because she's a German teacher, to this nationwide competition. And there was me and about 29 other kids from around the country that won this competition, and the prize was to go for a month-long summer school in Edinburgh, where we will learn all these different kinds of writing. And what I chose to do was I wanted to learn screenwriting. So there was me and 5 other kids, and we actually co-wrote an episode of Brookside, which aired.
Wow.
So that's, yeah, I know. And that I was 16 at the time. I remember I'd finished my GCSEs, and it was in the summer before you go back to school or college to do your A-levels. And that was when everything changed for me. Before that, I think I was so indoctrinated into you're going to do medicine to the point where I wasn't even fighting it. I didn't even think of fighting it. I was happy to do medicine.
Yeah.
I actually thought of it, well, that's a really respectable career, being a doctor. That's really cool. The writing was just something I did for fun. But after that episode aired, something just changed inside me. And now I could see that writing is a potential career option. So I went back to doing my A-levels at school, and I'd picked subjects to study medicine. So I'd picked biology, chemistry, and maths, the things that you should study. And within 6 weeks, I was just so unhappy because now I knew there was another path for me that I never thought of before. So I ditched all my subjects and changed them, and my dad didn't speak to me for 6 months because of that. So there you go. I know, that was an uncomfortable 6 months when you live with somebody and you have dinner with somebody and they literally will not speak to you, not even a word. He was really, really disappointed. But I'm glad I stuck to my guns. It was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to make a living writing in some way. So that's where it started. That's the thing that happened that made me go, that's what I want to do with my life.
And that journey from, obviously the Brookside bit was the Brookside kind of moment. Getting your episode aired must have been huge and like you say, kind of life changing insofar as the direction you took. But
yeah,
the gap from there to actually being able to make a living from it, having gone through the studying and so on, what was that journey like?
Oh, tortuous. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody unless you really, really want to do it. So for me, what happened was I changed my A-level subjects. So then I got into a media studies degree in Manchester, which I just messed up royally. I think because I come from a very... I don't want to say a strict background, because my parents were actually quite forward thinking.
Right.
Compared to a lot of other Asian parents. This was a time in the 80s and 90s. It was very normal to see Asian families where the boys would be sent to a grammar school or a private school, and the girls were left to languish in a public school because, well, they're just going to get married off anyway. What's the point? My dad put me into a private school, and I have 2 sisters and a brother. He never saw any difference between his son and his daughters, which is very forward thinking at that time. So I don't want to paint my parents as being backwards in any way. But I think compared certainly to white parents, they would be classed as strict. I certainly wasn't allowed to go out. I didn't have a curfew because I wasn't allowed out. So you can't have a curfew. It's like, I would have my white friends who would, complain to me at school, oh my God, I got to be back home by 9 p.m. I'm looking at them going, you're allowed to stay out till 9 p.m. I don't have a 9 p.m. curfew because I have to get in from school and stay in. So what are you talking about? What are you complaining about? So typically, because I was so sheltered, as soon as I went to university, guess what happened? Just went off the rails completely. And no, spectacularly, Jim.
Really?
I'm talking about spectacularly going off the rails.
Wow.
Within, I think it was 8 months into the first year, I was kicked out of university.
Wow.
I developed an addiction to amphetamines and ecstasy pills.
My goodness.
And I lost my accommodation because it was linked to the university, obviously. And because I didn't want to go home to my parents because I was so scared of their reaction, I ended up in homeless shelters for a year. So I'm talking about really spectacularly going off the rails. I even now when I go to places, if I go and get an Airbnb somewhere, okay, that hasn't happened recently because of this stupid pandemic. But before that, I have this habit of going to couches and pulling up the cushions and checking for needles, even though I know there's no needles, because that's what we got trained in that time. I was at that shelter. We always had to check the cushions to make sure there's no used needles before we sat down on the couch. So that became a habit. It's just something that I did. And even now, I'm in my 40s now. So this is over half my life ago. This was when I was 19. And yet still, even now, I have to fight the urge to not take up the cushions and make sure there's no needles somewhere before I sit down. So it stays with you. And yeah, that wasn't a good point in my life, but I was assigned some amazing coaches and therapists and mentors who really, really helped me. And then I was able to get back into Manchester University and finish my degree. And then I was able to do my master's at the London School of Journalism. So things kind of picked up. And then I had one of the most happiest periods of my life. I became a journalist, a freelance journalist. So I wrote for the Manchester Evening News and several other local newspapers and magazines. Really, really good period of my life. And then, I don't know how old you are, Jim, but if you're around about my age, you will remember 2001, 2002, when there was this strange thing called new media. Do you remember when we used to call the internet new media?
Yeah.
And what happened was a lot of editors were letting all of the journalists go because they thought no one's going to be reading newspapers and magazines anymore. They're going to want to go into this new media thing. So I lost my job, and that was a really, I hit rock bottom. That actually, I developed depression because of that. I ended up on antidepressants for a while. It's hard at the age of 25, I was then. It's hard to feel that that's it. You're washed up at 25. And that's what I felt. I genuinely had no idea how I was going to make writing work for me. And I didn't. For the next 12, 13 years, I just did all kinds of jobs. I was a recruitment consultant for a while. I've worked in a bank for a while. Gosh, that was terrible, working in a call center, being shouted at by people who are just upset because they don't have money in their bank account, which was my fault, of course, not theirs. Obviously not theirs, that they mismanaged their money. It's my fault. So, all kinds of jobs just to make ends meet. I even decided to get back into medicine. I lost my father in 2007, which really affected me. And then the guilt started. And I thought he always wanted me to do something in medicine. Well, if I'm not going to have a career in writing, I might as well go back to plan A, So then I decided to go back to university, and I did a degree in psychology. I worked in psychiatric wards for 5 years. I worked in a prison for 6 months. So I've kind of seen the business end of when things really go wrong with mental health and that kind of thing. And then for me, the turning point was in 2013, I got a call from an old friend of mine in Manchester. I'd moved back to the northeast of England because my dad had died. And my mother asked me, as the oldest of an Indian family, the tradition is the responsibility lands on your shoulders. So I had to take over as the head of the family, sort out the finances, go through probate, all that kind of thing. So I was now based back in the northeast of England. And a friend of mine in Manchester contacted me to tell me about this Google update. And I still remember the conversation as if it happened yesterday. I remember getting really annoyed with him because I let him rabbit on for about 5 minutes. And then I just went, Alan, seriously, why have you rang me to talk about some technical update that Google has done? All I care about Google is, will it find me the search results I'm looking for? Otherwise, I don't give a flying whatever about, do you know what I mean? It's like, why are you talking to, he's a search engine optimization specialist. So for him, I get it, but why is he talking to me about it? And then he said, he kind of was, he's sharp with me, and he just said, Mitali, can you just shut up and let me finish? And then you'll see the point of why I'm telling you. And what he was trying to tell me was, because of this new Panda update, it was called, and it meant that previously website owners can just outsource out their blog and articles and website content to Southeast Asian people or Eastern European people, where it was just about good enough English, but mainly it's all about getting the right keywords in there to rank on Google. This new update came in, and now it was no longer about just keywords. It was about how much people engaged with the content. Are they actually reading it? Are they then clicking on links to go onto other content to carry on reading? So it was now measuring engagement and time spent on the website, which opened up the doors for native English speakers and writers like me, because now these website owners, if they want to rank well on Google, they couldn't rely on these other writers who can undercut us. You know, there's people in Southeast Asia who will write an article for $10. How do I compete with that? You know, there's no. I'd rather be unemployed. I make more money just being unemployed than being paid that. So that was the turning point for me. So I started writing content for all kinds of websites. I mean, I've got some funny stories there. You learn a lot about, because I'm a writer for hire. You can get me to write anything. As long as it's not immoral or illegal, I can write anything.
You write it.
So, I write it. You know, if you pay me enough money, I'll write it. So I remember one of my best clients was a gentleman in Arkansas, and he had a gun store. So I would spend a lot of my time writing about guns and holster. I've never handled a gun in my life. I don't want to handle a gun in my life. I never want to do anything with guns. I don't want to touch one. I've never touched one. And yeah, I would write about all these different kinds of guns. I even wrote articles about how to shoot someone in the dark. Yeah, all that.
Wow.
I know, all sorts of things. And then another thing, before I reveal this next story, I just need to ask your audience, is this like a PG or explicit, or
No,
how far can I go?
You can F and Jeff, you can say whatever you like. It's fine.
Excellent. Just making sure. I just want to know what age group you're going in with your podcast. So one summer I was commissioned to write a ton of articles. I think it was 100 articles. It was a big project. With a gentleman in London who was a Love Honey affiliate. So I spent that August writing about 100 articles on different kinds of cock rings.
Oh.
And again, never felt the need to use one, never asked a partner of mine to use one. But I know everything there is to know about cock rings now because of this
Incredible
project.
learning experience.
It's amazing. It's amazing what you end up learning because someone's paying you to write about it and you have to go and research things. And yeah, so that's how I started getting back into the writing world. And from that, I moved into copywriting purely because it's more money.
Right.
I got jealous when I started to meet copywriters. And, I'd charge maybe $50 or $100 an article, and they would charge $1,000 or $2,000 for a sales page, which is only slightly longer than one of my articles. So I think, well, hang on a minute. I want to earn that kind of money. So I started to learn copywriting, it's content writing, but specifically to get a sale.
Yeah.
So whereas content writing is just writing about, and the sale is more indirect. Whereas with copywriting, you're getting people to buy something or sign up to a list, or you're getting them to do something. You're creating an action in them. That's copywriting. So I moved into that. And then one of my best copywriting clients one day came to me and said, hey, I'd like to write a book. No, edit. I'd like you to write my book for me. Do you fancy doing it? And I remember going, I've never written a book in my life. I don't know how to write books. But if you will give me a chance and you're not expecting it in the next couple of months, then yeah, I'll give it a go. And that went on to become a bestseller.
Wow.
So that's how the book writing started. So literally, it's just like a domino effect. And the weird thing is, Jim, if I look back over my life now, it's like I had some dastardly plan. It's like even like the working in psychiatric wards and working in a prison, that really helped my copywriting because I really understood psychology. I mean, I really was at the brunt end of what goes wrong with human nature. So I could really understand that. And I was able to use a lot of my experiences in the psychiatric ward to help with my copywriting, which then helped with my book writing as well. Because a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of psychology behind a good book and what makes you keep turning the page and wanting to finish the book, whether it's a story, fiction, or whether it's a business book, which is what I specialize in. There's a lot of psychology behind why someone would want to carry on and finish your book. And it's like I had some sort of master plan, but I honestly didn't. I've just fallen in from one thing to the next.
So on the chronology here, I think you'd become vegan during that period, is that right?
Yes, so the vegan thing has been completely separate to this. So I have a cat. She's still running around here somewhere at the moment. And she came to me and the rest of the family in 2009, I believe it was. She was a year old. And before that, we've had a couple of budgies when I was younger. I vaguely remember having a couple of budgies. But we never really, and this is gonna sound awful because I think Asian families have evolved a lot since then. But in the 80s, Asian families and pets, the two just don't mix. You would rarely meet an Asian family that had pets. It was just something that white people did, according to us. Do you know what I mean? It's like these strange white people. They have pets and they have shoes and they walk in with their shoes into the homes and they muddy up the carpets. It's just white people stuff. We don't do stuff like that, you know? So we didn't have pets. And my family were quite forward thinking and having budgies. That was amazing. I remember some raised eyebrows when we had some Indian families that would come and visit us and they'd be like, there's a budgie. Oh my God, doesn't it poo? And it's like, well, of course it does. We do as well. We all do. But they just found that really weird that we would have even a bird. And that was a bird in a cage, not even going anywhere. And we would let it out when the family wasn't around. But, you know, otherwise it was in a cage. The idea of an animal walking around the house with us was a foreign concept to a lot of Indian and Bangladeshi families. So I think coming from that background, it's easy to think of animals as these, they don't really know what's going on. They're not really intelligent. You know, it's difficult to really get a concept of how intelligent, it's emotionally intelligent. That's the thing. It's not intelligence in that sense, but how much they are capable of from an emotional point of view. And then when Isha turned up in our lives, she's a rescue cat. And it took about, I think, 2 to 3 years. But she understands everything. She knows my mood. She knows when I'm having a down day. She knows when I'm having a great day. She's so in tune to my moods. And I could just see this intelligence that was just far beyond anything I was led to believe. And I think also it suits a lot of industries out there. For us to think of animals as they don't really know what's going on. Because if we believe that, it becomes easier to do what we do to animals. You know, I'm going to get probably a little bit too deep here, Jim. I apologize. But I do believe... Let's go for it. Let's go for the deep dive.
Yeah, you go for it.
But I do believe that all crime, all negativity, all the bad things that human beings do to animals and to each other... The first step to being able to do anything like that is to reduce a person or an animal down to an object. If you can't do that, you literally cannot carry on and do anything. Whether that's the tiniest thing, such as slapping somebody or slapping an animal, to doing horrific things like killing or raping or anything. You can't do that. You physically can't. It's when you are able to see every living thing as something that is emotional and compassionate, whatever horrible thing you're thinking of doing, you stop there. You can't go, you can't move any forwards. And I think that's why for the meat industry, for the cosmetics industry, all these industries, it suits them to give us this narrative that animals don't really know what's going on. You know, I read a report recently where they estimated that an adult pig has the understanding of a 4-year-old human child. But the meat industry doesn't want us to know that. They want us to think of pigs as these tasty things who don't really know what's going on. So when they're slaughtered, it happens so fast they're unaware. No, they know exactly what's going on. And when they're separated and a pig goes off to be slaughtered, the other pigs know exactly what's going on. They know what's happening. Do you know what I mean? But it suits us not to know those things so we can carry on doing those things, you know? Having Isha in my life just fundamentally changed me. And I do find it ironic because it took a true carnivore to turn me into a vegan. It's like, because with cats, you can't, with dogs, you can actually give them vegetables and they'll be okay. But with cats, they have to eat meat, otherwise they die, you know? So it's strange they took a true carnivore to turn me vegan. But it was that realization that animals know so much more than we give them credit for. And that's why I went from being a meat eater, someone who ate everything. And I was, you know, the sort of person, I was what I call a true meat eater. So my steak was so rare My mother used to say it mooed when I put the fork in because it was that rare. She hated it. She was like, that's not even cooked. I used to have blue steak. That was my thing. And I used to eat offal. So I eat liver, heart, brains. I was a real meat eater. I couldn't even become vegetarian because I just thought, I can't even do that. I can't even go vegetarian to slowly become vegan, because I remember reading a report where I realized that if I was reborn as a cow, it would be better for me to be reborn as beef cattle. Because at least 9 months into my life or so long, I'll be put out of my misery.
Yeah.
Being a dairy cow is a far worse life, you know?
100%,
So
yeah.
I realized that I couldn't even be vegetarian. So I literally had to go from eating everything to straight into veganism. So it was a hard shift, but I couldn't even bring myself to be vegetarian because the guilt was there now. The realization of, Have you seen that? Oh, Simon, I've forgotten his name. It's
Simon
a comedian.
Amstel?
But
Carnage. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. You've seen it.
Yeah.
And that was all about, it's a mockumentary kind of thing,
Yeah.
isn't it? But he talks about people in the future. It's like 2050, I think.
Yeah.
And he's talking about people needing counseling now, the older generation, because now animals can communicate with us and are able to tell us what they've been through. And now all these people are needing counseling to get over what they did to those animals. And I remember watching that and going, oh my God, that was me in 2012, 2013 when I became vegan, even though no animals were talking to me. Don't worry, Jim. I wasn't I wasn't like, Dr. Doolittle or anything. No, I wasn't, nothing like that. I wasn't an animal whisperer or anything like that. But I felt that guilt. So when I watched Carnage, I absolutely got that. I was like, that's what I went through, and that's what turned me into a vegan.
Yeah. Was it, looking back, was it kind of like a relatively quick switch for you? Going from that, like you say, a true meat eater to where you were. Was it an overnight thing almost, or was it over the course of time?
It was I think it was over 3 years. So what I did was, once Isha came into my life, within a year, I can just see this little tiny furball who seemed to understand so much of what is going on with the whole family. She would pinpoint which one wasn't having a good day, and she'll go and spend time with just that one. She would really understand all of us. So I didn't turn vegan straight away. I think what I did was I realized I needed to be more ethical in my choices.
Right.
So what I started to do was I was vegan outside of the home, but inside of the home, I would have meats that would come from specific farms where I know there's no intensive farming going on. And, it's the old fashioned way of farming, which reflected in the prices, of course. A chicken would be 15 to 20 pounds from this farm, whereas you can get a whole chicken for a £5 at Tesco's. But that made me very aware too how we're not aware that we're trying to get best value, but by doing that, we're adding to cruelty. What we should be doing is thinking, hang on a minute, how can a whole chicken be £5 that's been packed? Tesco's needs to make a profit. They need to pay their staff. The farmer needs to make a profit. So how much money was left for the poor old chicken? Not much. A penny? 2 pence? But you don't think like this until you're confronted with it, and then you think, gosh, that makes sense. Really, a whole chicken should be 15 to 20 pounds, or maybe even more, really. So I started to buy more ethically. That lasted for about 3 years. And then what changed me from that is, I don't know if you remember, so around 2013 was when veganism was starting to take a little bit of a hold. It was still something that a lot of people didn't understand, but I was starting to find people who did know what the term vegan meant. So I started to see more activism going on with veganism. I started to see more places that would have, there was a vegan restaurant. There was only one vegan restaurant in the whole of Newcastle upon Tyne and Gateshead put together, but at least there was one vegan restaurant, which was great. Before that, there wasn't even a restaurant. So I started to see that, And that was when I realized that, and this is something that annoys me now as well, that people started, marketing agencies started to use veganism and other things like sustainability, ethics. They started to use that against us to market stuff to us. You know, I found out during that time, that to be legal in this country, I don't know if this has changed, by the way, this law might have changed since then.
Yeah.
But in 2013, you can say your eggs are free range so long as a chicken has, I think, 0.5 meter of space around itself from the next chicken. And I just thought, that's not how free range is marketed to us. When we think of free range and when we see the pictures on the egg boxes, it's the sun is there, there's fields, the chickens are running around and happy. That's what people think of free range. And yet the legal definition of free range is the chicken just needs to be not in a cage and needs to have, I think it was 0.5 meter or something like that around it before there's another chicken. I'm like, that's not free range. And that's when I started to realize that these terms, free range, sustainable, ethical, vegan, are being used as marketing terms to get us to buy shit, pardon my language. And that made me really angry. The one that really makes me angry at the moment, or has done the last couple of years, is Laboratoires Garnier. Have you noticed they put, our shampoos are vegan? They test on animals. So I'm like, what the hell? You're telling me there's no animal product gone into the shampoo, and yet you're going to test on animals. You show me a vegan who's happy to use your shampoo because you don't have animal bits in it, but yet is okay with you testing on animals to make sure it's safe. They're adding vegan now onto all their shampoos and conditioners. Because it sells. It makes people go, oh, this is vegan, this is good, and they buy it, not realizing that, okay, maybe no animal products are in it, but it's being tested on animals. So that's when I became vegan, because I started to get really angry that these terms were being used almost against me to make me buy stuff that really wasn't as ethical as I thought. You know, it's like organic. Organic is a whole con by itself. True organic is you go to a farm and you pick the stuff yourself. That's organic. But, you know, the organic term, from what I'm aware, you can class something as organic so long as it was grown organically and no pesticides were used. But then after it's been harvested, you can spray it with whatever you want. It's still organic. So do you know what I mean? These terms are now being used against us to make us think we're making ethical choices and healthy choices, but we're not. So I became vegan because I was sick of being lied to.
Yeah.
You know, I was buying free-range eggs and now realizing those free-range eggs, those chickens still weren't happy. And that's when I just started to distrust everybody when it comes to any industries to do with animals. And maybe it was wrong for me to just, you know, in a blanket way, distrust everybody. Maybe there are some good providers in that industry. But I just got to a stage where I was tired of spending so much of my time researching and feeling stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to make decisions for my life, trying to make ethical choices, to the point where I just went, right, that's it, enough. I'm just going to go vegan. That's it. I don't have anything to do with animal products whatsoever. It was almost a reaction to being taken for a ride. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was about, I would say, 3 to 4 years between Isha coming into my life and me becoming fully vegan.
Do you think, like, looking at it now, you know, as someone who's had vast experience as a writer for businesses, business coaching, business books, this kind of world, and then thinking back to your journey into veganism itself and having this frustration with businesses essentially greenwashing through their marketing, is that, do you think, looking back, that's been the inspiration for you wanting to kind of meld the two worlds together?
Well, what's actually happened with molding the two? This has literally happened just in the last few weeks, James. So this is so what I've learned is, and I've been listening to a lot of your previous episodes, and what struck me is with a lot of vegans, they get into veganism usually because they've met somebody,
Right.
you know? So either they start dating somebody who's a vegan, or there was that wonderful chap that you interviewed, Bill, the military guy,
Yeah.
and he went to a punk rock festival, which punk rockers I've always loved. Do you know what I mean? I was born too late, unfortunately. I wish I was a little bit older, so I was part of that movement. But it doesn't surprise me that punk rocker festivals had, you know, stalls there promoting veganism. The thing is, what I've noticed with a lot of vegans is they met somebody or they went to some sort of event and they got initiated into some sort of vegan tribe. And they kind of grew and they got to know other vegans. I had a really odd initiation into veganism in that it wasn't a human being, it was a cat. So I never joined a tribe. So I had no idea that the vegan world had grown to such an extent.
Right.
I had an inkling in 2017, if you remember, 2017 in the UK was called the Year of the Vegan. And I missed it. I moved to Thailand. So I was so annoyed. It was like, I moved to Thailand for a couple of years and the Year of the Vegan happened. I was like, are you kidding me, guys? Did you wait until I left the country to have the Year of the Vegan? And I came back to the UK and suddenly Greggs are doing vegan sausages. And I'm like, what the hell happened while I was away in Thailand? Like, seriously, what happened? So I had an inkling when I came back after my stint in Thailand. I thought, wow, before I really struggled to find somewhere to eat, I used to sometimes just live on French fries because sometimes that's all I'd be able to get, French fries and ketchup, literally nothing else that I could eat. So I would live on French fries and ketchup when I was out and about. And then I come back from Thailand in 2018, early 2018. And suddenly Greggs are doing vegan sausages and you know, McDonald's got a plant-based option. I'm like, what happened when I was away? So I had an inkling that veganism had really become overground. But I still, because I had no vegan tribe, I had no vegan friends. There is no vegans in my family. I don't even have a vegetarian in my family. I have a few pescatarians and that's it. The rest of them eat everything. I don't have any vegan friends. So I was almost in isolation, and my veganism was something that I did in my life because it's something I believe. I'm very bloody minded. I'm one of these arrogant people that genuinely believe if I believe something, I'm right. I don't give a crap what you think. I believe it, so you're not going to change me. So I'm quite stubborn like that. So that was my thing. I don't want to have anything to do with animal products. I did it on my own with no support from anybody. And I didn't have a tribe. So because of that, I got no feedback from the vegan world telling me what's going on. And then I released my book earlier this year. And my book, the whole point of my book is to get people interested in writing business books. That's my business.
Yeah.
I help people write business books. And people started contacting me, and some of those were vegans. And they'd found out from other people. It's like, oh, she's vegan. And they would contact me and say, why are you not promoting the fact that you're vegan? Why do I go on your website, your social media profiles, and there's literally nothing on there about the fact that you're vegan? And I would say, well, I'm not hiding it. I'm proud of the fact that I'm vegan, but I just never thought of bringing it into my business. It's just something I did in private. And then from this year, I've started to meet people. Heather, who you also, Heather Landix, you interviewed on another episode of your podcast. I met Heather. And then through Heather, I met all these other people. And there's this whole world of vegan business leaders and entrepreneurs. I've even met this lady, I've forgotten her name. And she even has, you know, you have like sort of the FTSE 100.
Yeah.
She has that for vegan entrepreneurs.
Really?
She has her own FTSE 100 of vegan businesses. And I'm like, oh my God, this is huge. And speaking to her and speaking to all these other vegans, they've just said, you need to become more visible as a vegan book coach and publisher, because there isn't one. And I actually researched and I found one publisher based in the States called Vegan Publishing. Bless them. That must have been a long day when they came up with that name. Well done, guys. You came up with a catchy name there. They're called Vegan Publishing. And that's what it does. You can't knock them, really. At least you know what you get with them. Wonderful. And I looked at their website. They're brilliant, by the way. What they do, they don't even do what I do. What they do is they help people publish. So you come to them with a final manuscript and they publish books on veganism. So recipe books, even children's books, not what I do, which is I teach entrepreneurs how to coach them to write a business book and publish it. So they're not even a direct competitor. I couldn't find anyone. So all of these vegan leaders were saying, you need to become more visible because, and you've been vegan now for nearly a decade, so you're not a new vegan who's just trying it for a few months and seeing how you feel. You're hardcore into it. So that's when the idea came. I honestly, up until the beginning of this year, had no concept that the vegan world had got that big. I was aware that there was more vegan food available for me, which made me happy because it makes my life a lot easier to be able to walk somewhere and just be able to get vegan food. Or not have that. I remember Heather was talking about how she hated that you go to places and they veganize food by just taking stuff out. And you're just going, that's not, you just give me a bowl of vegetables now. You don't, when I want vegan food, I have taste buds. Vegans have taste buds. We don't lose our taste buds when we become vegan. So you can't just take the cheese out, take the sauce out, and then serve it to us. Yeah. You know, we still want it to taste good. So it's nice now that I can go to places and they give me vegan food that actually tastes nice. But I had no idea that the world had got that big and that you now have, I've been on Clubhouse now and I've connected with a couple of people who are vegan fashion designers and they're building these huge business. I had no idea. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've been living under a rock for the last 10 years because I didn't, you know, I wasn't choosing to stay out the world. I just didn't even know the world existed. It was just something I did on my own because I felt it was morally unacceptable, ethically unacceptable for me to carry on eating and using animal products. So I made a decision in my life. I'm not going to have any part of it anymore. And that was it. That was me done. And I never went and sought any kind of support from anybody or anything to get that feedback from the vegan world and know how far it got until my book came out and people started contacting me.
That's incredible.
I know. I feel like I've been living, I do feel like I've been living under a rock and it's like, oh my God, I had no idea this was going on.
Like you say, it's I suppose if you're not actively looking for that community, you're happy doing what you're doing.
It makes me wonder where I'm honestly, I think, a psychologist would have a field day with me and I'm trying to work out my brain. It's like, well, that's a bit weird because most people do. Most people, when they take on some sort of endeavor, they usually look for some sort of support. And in this day and age, it's easier than ever because now you just go online and there's Facebook groups and there's communities. There's communities that it was more difficult to find without the internet. And yet I never even thought of it. It never even dropped into my mind. Why don't I find a Facebook group of vegans? I never even thought about it. I was just happy doing my business and I was just happy being a vegan and that was it. And the two things didn't come together until this year. And I just thought, and suddenly I thought, why don't I bring these two things together? They're the only two things I'm really passionate about in my life. If you know me at all, Jim, I know we don't know each other very well, but hopefully in the future we will know each other. You'll realize I'm pretty useless at practically everything else. I'm really terrible at everything else. I'm the sort of person that can, I can burn anything. I'm terrible at cooking. I can't do anything right. I can't drive. I've got dyspraxia. I've completely totaled 3 cars to the point where the insurance just paid out. They didn't even, there was no point in actually repairing the cars because they were in such bad shape. They just paid out and they said, just go and get yourself a new car. I can't do anything right. The only 2 things I do right is I'm able to write and help people write. And I love animals, all kinds, the cute ones and the ugly ones. I like, that's the 2 things I do right in my life. It suddenly made sense. Why don't I bring those 2 things together? They're the 2 strands of my life, really.
This must be a hugely exciting revelation to have come to because the world of vegan business, I think, has exploded. I've certainly seen lots of growth in the community of those vegan businesses. What I love seeing as well at the vegan business startups, entrepreneurs, etc., is that it's such a positive, encouraging, uplifting world. I think because everyone's got this same vision of a vegan world, that they're quite happy to support one another, probably unlike the sort of mainstream business world.
Absolutely.
So it must be, given the incredible success you've had as a business coach and coach of entrepreneurs writing their own books through your book and so on, this must be incredibly exciting, this revelation that you've had recently.
It is. It's exciting. And I have to say it's a little daunting as well. I've already had a little bit of a backlash, which I find interesting because I haven't even had the chance yet to change my social media profiles. If you go onto my website now and you go to my social media profiles, still no mention of the fact that I'm vegan. It's all business, entrepreneurs. I help coaches, consultants, speakers, all that kind of stuff. There's no mention of veganism. In fact, the only place, I call it my coming out place, as if I was in a closet somewhere, but I wasn't. The only place I've come out as a vegan has been Clubhouse. So my Clubhouse profile does say, you know, vegan, plant-based, and this is what I want to do, because I've only been on it for the last 3 weeks. So Clubhouse has kind of come at the same time as me realizing that I want to work with vegan entrepreneurs and business leaders. And despite the fact that it's only on Clubhouse that I've come out, I still had somebody on Facebook who berated me, a meat eater, obviously, who said that I was discriminating against non-vegans. Oh, right. And I didn't even say that I only wanted to work exclusively with vegans. All I was saying was I wanted to become more visible in the vegan world and just show up as a vegan, because that's what I am. I have been for nearly 10 years. And yet that got me a backlash. So it's exciting and daunting at the same time. I've realized that, again, because I've been a little bit sheltered, because it's something I did privately and I didn't seek. I think if I'd done what normal people do, obviously not normal, if I'd done what normal people do and go and find other people who have their interests and found other vegans, they probably experienced backlash over the last few years. In fact, they probably had lots of backlash several years ago when veganism was still something that people didn't understand, and it wasn't. Now we have Veganuary and people know what it's all about. You know, going back to 2012, 2013, when I became a vegan, lots of people didn't even know what a vegan was. I remember one guy thinking it was a disease because he actually apologized to me. Well, I'm really sorry. How can I help you with that? Is that like, what kind of disability? It's like, no, it's not a disability. Do you know? But yeah, I had to explain to him what it was. That won't happen now. People know in the UK anyway. Even if they're completely against it, they know what a vegan is. Yeah. So I think I would have experienced some sort of backlash. But because I've been living under my rock without any communication from the vegan world, that was the first backlash, and that kind of knocked me for six a little bit. So I ended up going on to Clubhouse and talking to a few people about it in vegan groups. But they were lovely. They were just like, yes, this is going to happen. I know it's hard for you because you've not had this. We're used to it. So where the vegan entrepreneurs are actually used to posting on social media. Yeah. And there's always some idiot that crops up and, you know, just to get at you, you know, just to bring you down. And they're so used to it now, they're like, yeah, whatever, you know, water off a duck's back. But because I hadn't experienced it, it really got to me. So I ended up going on to Clubhouse into a few of these, you know, vegan clubs, and they built me right back up. And they just said, look, you're doing the right thing. This is what you should be doing. You're just going to have to grow some thick skin. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But don't worry about it. We all get it. We all get it. So I'm going to plow ahead. Don't worry about it. But definitely plowing ahead. So I'm excited. But yeah, it's daunting. It's daunting as well.
I'm sure you'll find huge support within the sort of vegan community and the particularly vegan businesses. I think they're so often crying out for people who can support and mentor and guide them. I think it's you know, it'll be well received, no doubt. I'm excited because, you know, it is, the more people are aware of it. I think it was it Captain Paul who said in one of your episodes, you know, the documentaries are amazing, you know, because Seaspiracy, what is it, like number 2 or number 3 on Netflix in the country at the moment? And it brings out, but the problem with the documentary is that takes a lot of money and a lot of talent to create a documentary. Yeah. But writing a book isn't that difficult as long as you have someone showing you. And there's something about books like documentaries, it brings conversation to the table and makes people think about veganism, because
people, I always said, I remember somebody asking me, and I remember someone trying to pay me a compliment, which is always interesting as a vegan when people try and pay you a compliment. So this guy was trying to pay me a compliment, says, "You're a nice vegan." I was like, okay, please, let me unpack this. What does this mean? What's a nice vegan? He said, well, I've met vegans who just kind of, they get really funny with me because I really like eating meat and that kind of thing. And, but you're a nice one. And I was like, well, I'd prefer you not to eat meat, but I do respect your choices. But then, I explained to him that those vegans do mean well. They obviously just love animals so much that it really bubbles inside of them until they can't contain it. So I actually feel bad for those vegans, who lose it sometimes. But what you have to remember is no human being in the history of mankind has ever been made to change their ways by being belittled or being made to feel ashamed. People don't change that way. The only way human beings change their attitude is by being inspired to change. That's the only thing that changes the way a human being thinks. So if you get angry at someone and make them feel bad, even if somehow you've managed to switch on a light bulb, they're not going to show it to you. They're going to dig in their heels just to win the argument, even if at some point they've actually thought, crap, that person's right. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to visibly say anything to you because they want to win the argument. So you have to inspire people to change. And one of the best ways to do that is if you've got the money and you're someone like Captain Paul, then documentary is amazing. But a lower cost or a lower energy level to entry is to become a published author. So I'm excited to be able to help vegan entrepreneurs and vegan business leaders because, it would be my contribution in helping them amplify their voices so we have more of a vegan world. Because I genuinely believe in my lifetime, there will be more vegans than there are carnivores in the human race. I believe that will happen within my lifetime. But it's only going to happen if the vegan voices are amplified and they get louder to the point where people just cannot ignore them and it becomes the norm to become vegan.
I completely agree. Yeah, I'm on that note. I'm incredibly intrigued by something you said earlier, and by really the premise of your book itself. Insofar as I think you said something along the lines of it being relatively. I'm not sure if you said easy, but I heard it as easy, relatively easy to write a book, and I've always thought I've got a book in me somewhere. I'd love to write a book, but the thought of it is mind-bogglingly daunting to me. Without ruining all of your book and giving away all of your secrets, which I'm sure we haven't got time to do anyway because your knowledge is so vast. It'd be great to understand a little bit of the premise of the book and the premise of that philosophy that anyone can write a book.
Okay, well, the premise of that philosophy is, it depends. I think the problem is the books are all pushed into one big pile, all the kinds of books out there. And we have this image in our heads of a tortured author. They usually had a terrible life and, they have mental health issues, but that's why they're a genius. There's a very fine line between insane and being a genius and that kind. And we have these, and there's an element of truth there when it comes to fiction and things like that. But the kind of books that I specialize in and the kind of books that my students write, they are first and foremost, they are business books. And what these business books are doing is furthering the cause of their business. So when you say, I know you're telling me that, God, it sounds like, such a big thing. I wouldn't even know where to start. The thing is, Jim, chances are in your business, you're doing it already. And this is quite a revelatory moment for a lot of people. When I talk about this to my students, it's something I go, oh my God, I never thought of that. So if you're as old as me, I'm in my 40s. I'm not bothered about my age. I tell people how old I am. I don't care. So if you're in the 80s and you're growing up, you will remember a time where if anybody wanted to promote a product or a service to you, they advertised. So they were on radio, they were on TV, or they're in the newspaper, and they would be like, hey, I've got this shiny new thing. If you want to buy it, contact me. And then you had to ring them, and then either they would have a conversation with you on the phone, or they would send you a catalogue or something like that. But for you to further that conversation and get to know whether this service or product's right for you, you had to actually contact them. There's no other way to do research. Fast forward to now, to 2021, that is not how the consumer buys in anything. I'm going beyond the vegan world here. I'm talking about literally anything and everything. That is not how you get clients or customers or whatever you want to call them. People now lurk. They literally lurk around and they research you for weeks, months, sometimes years. They'll just lurk in the shadows. You don't even know they exist, but they're lurking and they're watching and listening and reading what you have to say before they finally decide something happens to them. They reach almost like this boiling point where they go, that's it, I've heard enough. I like this person. I want to now actually become visible to that person and take it to the next level. I remember there was a wonderful article a few months ago that I read which showed an infographic. I'm a really visual person, so I love graphs and things like that. And it showed a graph of the timeline of when people used to contact a company back in the 80s and when people contact a company now before they're ready to buy. In the 80s, it was somewhere, it showed about 10 to 20% along the way, they contacted the company. So maybe they heard a radio advert, maybe they saw a print advert as well, maybe they saw something on TV, and the whole thing linked. And they went, yeah, I need to contact this company. I've seen them in the newspaper now. I've seen them on TV now. Yeah, they seem legit. And then they contact the company. Now, somebody is usually 70 to 80% of the way of becoming your client or customer before you even know they exist. I've had people tell me who've become students of mine who said, oh, yeah, I've been watching your live since October. October? I'm like, oh my God, you couldn't even hit the like button? That takes zero energy. I'm not even asking for a comment. Just punch the like button and just let me know you like my content. They didn't even do that. They lurked all those months. And then finally they got to that tipping point of when I really like this woman, I want to work with her. And then they contacted me. So you are already, as an entrepreneur in 2021, you are already talking about your business, your services, your products. You're on social media, on your website. You are giving value to people, showing people what you're good at, demonstrating your expertise. You are doing that in bite-sized bits already. Right. All a book is just an amalgamation of those bite-sized bits. So really, it's not that difficult. I think it's the whole tortured author thing that people go, that's when you're writing a novel. And that I've got no experience of. I'm the wrong woman to come to for that. So next, basically, I can't help you with that. But when it comes to business books and how-to books, and you as an entrepreneur, you're already doing it. And then what I will do is I will show you a foolproof structure for you to start amalgamating all of that knowledge, which is already there, and you're already doing it in tiny bits on social media, on your website and your blog, but just bringing it all together in a cohesive whole to make a book. It's really not as difficult as it sounds because you're doing it in a mini level anyway. It's just taking it up a notch and doing it on a major level. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And you're so right. The image I think of every time I've had this little notion in the back of my head about writing a book is Jack Kerouac and that roll of paper that he was supposed to have had and that typewriter.
Oh, yes.
And that he wrote in stream of consciousness with no punctuation on this typewriter for days on end without eating or drinking. That's the image. And so I think, I can't do that. I'm not that creative. I haven't got that
You don't need not that kind of creativity. The way I see it is, as an entrepreneur, you already are more creative than the average person anyway. The fact that you did what was not expected of you, which was go and do a 9 to 5, go up the career ladder, get yourself a mortgage, get yourself to, 2.4 kids, that kind of thing. The fact that you haven't done that and you've struck out on your own means you're a different breed altogether. I think that's the other issue I've noticed with entrepreneurs. Because entrepreneurs tend to hang around entrepreneurs, we tend to feel like the whole world is entrepreneurs, and we don't realize how unique we actually are, that the average person isn't an entrepreneur. So you're already creative. And you're already doing creative things by creating content for social media and for your blog and for your website, and you're doing lives and you're talking on Clubhouse and you're doing events and seminars and webinars. You're already doing all this stuff. So it's not, a book is just going slightly to the next level. That's all it is. You're not reinventing the wheel here. You're not creating something completely new. It's taking what you're already doing it, but just taking it to the next level. Because people respect books in a way. Like, think about, if you're an entrepreneur in 2021, of course you're on LinkedIn. Of course you're on Facebook. Possibly on Twitter and Instagram. Of course you have a website. You can't be an entrepreneur in 2021 and not have a website. But how many people are an author? So it's a differentiation point. So that's all it is. It's taking your knowledge. And actually, I want to give a tip to your listeners as well. My students don't write their books. They dictate them.
Right.
That's another key thing. There's something about sitting down and typing. First of all, that image that you've got of a tortured, that comes out, that's awful, and that puts people off. But there's another more fundamental issue with typing. And the thing is, when you type things, you can see the words because they form on the page. And because you can see the words form on the page, you keep going back and editing it. Because you think of a more clever word to use because you're trying to make yourself sound great, and that stops you. Whereas if you just dictate it into an app or a dictaphone, you can't see it, it's gone. Yeah. So what my students do is, once we've created the framework for their book so they know exactly what to say, they just go off and dictate different bits. And I just say, imagine you've got a client. So you've got a client right now. How do you explain that section of your service or that section of your product to them? And they're like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Like, they're a coach or a consultant. It's like, I bet you do that all the time. So that's all you're doing. But instead of a person, you pretend a person's there and you just dictate into an app or a dictaphone, and off it goes to be transcribed. It's that easy. I know a lot of people think like, oh my God, writing a book is hard. It's like, it's only as hard as you make it, but it's really, if you basically realize that you're doing it already in many bite sizes, you're already doing it. And secondly, if you dictate your book, which is what I did with my book, one of the nicest compliments I get about my book is, I've had several people say this, and if you read my book, I bet you'll say this as well. It's like you're in my head, Mitali. I can hear your voice when I'm reading the book. So that's exactly what I want. These books need to be very personable. They're not meant to sound like dry university textbooks. They're meant to make you sound, yes, like an authority, but also someone that is fun to work with. So you need both elements. You need someone who they trust will get the job done, whatever it is they're hiring you to do. So in my case, as a book coach, so my book has to make people believe, yes, she knows what she's talking about when it comes to books, and this is who I want to hire to help me write a book. But they also want me to be fun to work with, because no one likes working with a bore or someone who's annoying. And the difficult thing is, when you type, people change. I even had a lady say to me, it's like, I read back what I've typed and I don't sound like me. And I said, well, why are you typing then? Dictate it. So now she dictates all of her blog posts and her social media posts. She dictates it because I told her to go and dictate it. So her social media posts sound more personable and it sounds like her. Because when she was typing, she was going all formal. And she had no idea she was doing it. And then she'd read it back and go, my God, I sound so stuck up and formal. That's not even me. But that's what happens when you type instead of dictate. So that's a tip that you and the listeners can take away. Go and dictate stuff.
You've blown my mind, Mitali. You really have. I don't know what to do with my Jack Kerouac image now. It's gone.
Put it in the bin. That's where it belongs. That's where it belongs.
That's incredible. Incredible. So Well, we've been chatting for ages, but it's been awesome. Been awesome chatting with you, Mitali. Like I say, my mind has been blown, and I'm equally fascinated. I think you could write a biography next. I'd love to read that.
I might do that. I think that I already have an idea for book 2 and book 3, so maybe book 4 would be, if I'm famous enough to have the thing with autobiographies is, a lot of my book has elements of autobiography in it because I think that's important. People need to know who you are. Yeah. People are interested in knowing the person behind the business. But you don't want to make it all autobiography because, like, who are you, really? Unless you're like a footballer or some sort of celebrity, then people are not really all that interested. So maybe, I don't know, if I'm famous enough by book 4, I might do an autobiography.
I'd read it now.
Thank you.
It's
That's sweet of you.
Where would folks go to find out a little bit more about you, Mitali, and hopefully get in touch and pick up the book and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, the best place is just to go to my website. Well, I've got 2 websites. I'll give you the one for my book. That makes more sense. So it's thefreedommasterplan.com. So my book is called The Freedom Master Plan. So the website is thefreedommasterplan.com. If they go there, they can download a free sample chapter. So the first chapter they can just download and have a read. And if they like it, they can just go to Amazon and they can get it on Kindle or they can get it on paperback. If you're like me and you like tangible books, you can go and get it on paperback. I think that's a great place to start. I will warn all the vegans listening to this because there'll be a lot of vegans listening to this. It's called Bloody Vegans. There's nothing in the book that mentions that I'm vegan because obviously this book was written tail end of last year. And it's only in the last 2-3 weeks that I've decided I want to become more visible in the vegan world. So unfortunately, there'll be nothing about my veganism in there. But what it will do is for anybody who wants to write a book, if you read my book, you'll get a good understanding of what a book does for a business. It's all case study based. So what I did was I interviewed 7 of my previous clients and asked them what they did with their books because they've now got these massive businesses and they do very well. And that's because they were able to leverage their books. So it's all case study based on it's almost like what they did next with their book. Yeah. So it's really good if you're thinking of writing a book. One of the biggest issues I tend to find with would-be authors and authors, I've had many authors contact me and they say, okay, I've heard that you're really good. You've done really well with your book. Can you tell me what to do with my book? I'm thinking this is a bit backwards. What my students do is they work out what they want to do with their book first before they write a single word. Because sometimes knowing the end game will influence what goes into your book. Yeah. Whereas if you just write the book in a vacuum and now you're trying to work out what to do with the book. Can you see what I mean? Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. So I would say go and get my book. That will give you a real framework of understanding what a business book can do for your business, how it could fit into your business. There's like a ton of different strategies. You can just cherry pick the ones that will fit your specific business and your situation. And then once you have that, you have a better understanding of what will go into your book. So that's probably the best place. The other places are just come and find me on my social media places. Mitali Deypurkaystha, really ridiculously long name that no one can pronounce. I'm the only one on Facebook, but that's it. And so you'll find my brothers and sisters, but that's it. Nobody else in the whole of Facebook has our surname, so you'll find me.
Amazing. Well, listen, thanks, Mitali. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'll definitely be picking up a copy of the book and hopefully writing my own at some point.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.